Hello and welcome. We're so excited to have you with us today. Whether you're learning English as a beginner or you're working to improve your skills, you've come to the right place. Today, we're going to explore English sentence structure. Knowing how to make good sentences is super important when you're learning English. Right, Max?
That's right, Emma. Once you understand sentence structure, everything gets easier. You'll feel more confident speaking, writing, and even reading. Let's start with something simple. What is a sentence exactly?
Great question, Max. A sentence is a group of words that expresses a complete thought. It always has a subject and a verb. The subject is who or what the sentence is about, and the verb tells us what the subject is doing. For example, in the sentence, I eat pizza, the subject is I, and the verb is eat. See how simple that is?
Yes, it's really that simple. A basic sentence can be just two words. Like, she runs here. She is the subject and runs is the verb. But, Emma, sometimes sentences get a bit more complicated, right?
Yes, they do. Sometimes we add more information to our sentences. For example, we can add an object. The object tells us what the action is being done to. If I say she eats pizza, the subject is still she, the verb is eats, and now we also have pizza as the object.
So, an object makes the sentence clearer by showing what the action is happening to. That's really helpful. Let's go over a few more examples. How about, they play soccer? In this case, they is the subject, play is the verb, and soccer is the object.
Exactly. And the fun part is that you can make sentences longer and more interesting by adding other details. You can add information about where or when something happens. For instance, they play soccer every Sunday at the park. Now we know not just what they do, but also when and where.
Yeah, that sentence is much more interesting. Now, we can picture a group of people playing soccer in the park. By adding more information, you give more life to your sentence. Let's talk a little bit about different types of sentences. Emma, can you tell us about the four main types?
Sure, the first type is a declarative sentence. This is just a regular statement. It gives information. For example, she loves ice cream. That's a declarative sentence. The second type is an interrogative sentence. This is when you ask a question, like, do you love ice cream? The third type is an imperative sentence. This is when you tell someone to do something. For example, eat your ice cream. And finally, we have the exclamatory sentence. This shows strong emotion, like I love ice cream. You can hear the excitement, right?
Yeah, you can really hear the difference. So, declarative sentences tell us something, interrogative sentences ask a question, imperative sentences give a command, and exclamatory sentences express strong feelings. That's really clear.
Exactly. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk about. Sometimes sentences are short and simple, like I run, but other times they can be long and complex. A complex sentence has more than one idea in it. For example, I run because I want to stay healthy. Here, we have two ideas. I run and I want to stay healthy.
So, a complex sentence helps us connect ideas. That makes conversations more interesting. You can tell people not just what you do, but also why you do it or when you do it. Like, I study English because it's important for my career.
Yes, exactly. And you can join ideas with words like because, and, but, or so. These words are called conjunctions, and they help your sentences flow better. Let's try a few examples to show how conjunctions work.
All right. How about this one? She loves reading, but she doesn't have much time. In this sentence, but is the conjunction. It connects the two ideas. She loves reading and she doesn't have time.
Perfect example. Another one could be, he studies English, and he also practices speaking every day. The conjunction and helps us link the two actions.
Right, so the basic idea here is that we can make sentences more complex and interesting by adding more information and connecting ideas. Once you understand how to use subjects, verbs, and objects and how to add conjunctions, you're on your way to mastering English sentence structure.
Exactly. And we can always start with simple sentences and then slowly build them up to be more detailed.
All right, now that we've got the basics of sentence structure down, subjects, verbs, objects, and even conjunctions, let's take things a step further. I'm sure many of you are wondering, how can I make my sentences even better? Well, one way to do that is by using adjectives and adverbs. Emma, can you explain what those are?
Of course, Max, adjectives and adverbs are great tools to make your sentences more interesting and descriptive. Let's start with adjectives. An adjective is a word that describes a noun, which is the subject or object in your sentence. For example, in the sentence, "The dog is big," the word big is the adjective because it describes the dog.
Right. Adjectives help us add more detail. Instead of just saying dog, we can say big dog, small dog, happy dog, or loud dog. The sentence gives us a clearer picture. What about adverbs? How do they work?
Good question. Adverbs describe verbs. They tell us how, when, where, or why something happens. For example, if I say, "She runs quickly," the word quickly is an adverb because it describes how she runs. Adverbs usually end in "ly," but not always.
So, if adjectives describe nouns and adverbs describe verbs, we can make our sentences more detailed and expressive, right? Like, instead of just saying, "She runs," we can say, "She runs quickly," or even, "She runs quickly every morning." The sentence becomes richer. What other ways can we make our sentences better, Emma?
Another great way to improve your sentences is by using prepositions. Prepositions are words that show the relationship between two things. They often tell us about location, direction, or time. For example, in the sentence, "The book is on the table," the word "on" is the preposition because it shows the relationship between the book and the table.
So prepositions help us understand where things are when things happen or how they relate to each other. You could say, "The cat is under the chair," or "I will meet you at 3 o'clock." Under and at are prepositions that give the sentence more meaning.
Exactly, prepositions are small words, but they're really important for making clear and complete sentences. There are a lot of common prepositions like in, on, at, by, with, and from. You'll see them in almost every sentence.
That's right, and the more you practice with prepositions, the more natural your sentences will sound. So far, we've talked about simple sentences, complex sentences, adjectives, adverbs, and prepositions. All of these things help us make better sentences, but there's something else that's really important when you want to communicate clearly: word order.
Yes, word order is a key part of sentence structure. In English, we follow a specific order for most sentences. The basic pattern is subject plus verb plus object. For example, "I eat pizza." I is the subject, eat is the verb, and pizza is the object. But what happens if we change the word order?
Good point. If we change the word order, the sentence won't make sense. If you say, "Pizza eat I," it's confusing. That's why following the right word order is so important. In English, the subject usually comes first, followed by the verb, and then the object. It's like a formula that helps us understand each other.
Exactly. And there are some exceptions, like when we ask questions. For example, if you say, "I eat pizza," that's a statement. But if you want to ask a question, you change the word order. "Do I eat pizza?" In questions, we usually start with a helping verb like do or does, and then we have the subject and the main verb.
Yes, questions can be tricky because the word order is different. But once you get the hang of it, it becomes easier. And don't worry if you make mistakes at first, it's all part of the learning process. Just remember that in regular sentences, we stick to the subject-verb-object order most of the time. But Emma, what about more advanced sentence structures, like when we want to add more than one verb?
Good question, Max. This brings us to compound sentences. A compound sentence has two or more independent clauses. An independent clause is a part of a sentence that can stand alone because it expresses a complete thought. For example, I like pizza and I like pasta. Here, both I like pizza and I like pasta are independent clauses because they can each be a full sentence on their own. We use conjunctions like and, but and, or to join them together.
So, a compound sentence is just a simple sentences joined together by a conjunction, right? Like, she studies English, but she also likes science.
Exactly. And this is a great way to make your sentences longer and more complex without making them confusing. Just be sure that each part of the compound sentence can stand on its own as a complete thought. It's also important to use the right conjunction to connect them. And is for adding information, but is for showing contrast, and or is for giving choices.
That's a great tip, Emma. So far, we've learned about simple sentences, complex sentences, and now compound sentences. I think this gives us a lot of tools to work with when creating sentences in English. But there's something else we should talk about, sentence variety.
Oh yes, sentence variety is really important. If all of your sentences are the same length or structure, your writing or speaking can sound boring. For example, if you say, I like pizza, I eat pizza every day. Pizza is delicious. It sounds very repetitive. But if you mix up your sentences, it sounds more natural. I like pizza because it's delicious. Every day, I eat pizza for lunch. See how the sentences have different lengths and styles.
That's a great example. Emma, by changing the sentence structure and length, you make your language more engaging. You can use short sentences for simple ideas and longer sentences when you want to explain more. Let's try another example. How about, she is studying hard. She has a big test tomorrow. She is very nervous. Now, let's add some variety.
Sure, we could say she is studying hard because she has a big test tomorrow, and she feels very nervous about it. Now the sentence flows better, and it's more interesting to listen to or read.
Exactly, so using a mix of simple, compound, and complex sentences along with sentence variety can make your communication much stronger. It helps keep your listener or reader engaged, and it makes you sound more natural.
That's right, and don't forget, as you practice, you'll get better and better at choosing the right type of sentence for what you want to say. Whether it's a short, simple sentence or a long, detailed one, the more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
Definitely, practice is key. You don't have to rush, just take your time and start with what feels comfortable. Focus on getting your sentences correct, and then, over time, you can add more variety and complexity.
So far, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about simple sentences, compound sentences, and complex sentences. We've discussed how to use adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, and conjunctions to add more detail and connect ideas. We've even touched on how important it is to use the right word order and to vary your sentences. Now, Max, I think it's time we dive into something else that can really help learners' pronouns.
Absolutely. Emma, pronouns are really important in English. They help us avoid repeating the same words over and over again. Pronouns are words like he, she, it, they, we, you, and I. Instead of always saying, Emma is speaking or Max is speaking, we can just say, she is speaking or he is speaking. It makes things easier to follow and less repetitive.
Exactly. Pronouns replace nouns in a sentence once the noun has already been mentioned. For example, if I say, Max is my friend. Max loves pizza. I can replace Max with a pronoun and say, Max is my friend. He loves pizza. It's a small change, but it makes the sentence sound smoother.
That's right. It's especially helpful when you're talking about multiple people or things. Instead of repeating the same name or noun over and over, you can use pronouns to make the conversation flow better. For example, Sarah has a dog. Sarah takes the dog to the park every day. Sarah and the dog enjoy playing there. Instead, you could say, Sarah has a dog. She takes it to the park every day. They enjoy playing there. It's much cleaner that way.
Exactly, and there are different types of pronouns to be aware of. First, we have subject pronouns like I, you, he, she, it, we, and they. These are used as the subject of a sentence, like I run or they eat. Then we have object pronouns like me, you, him, her, it, us, and them. These come after the verb. For example, she called me or we saw them.
Right, and there are also possessive pronouns that show ownership, like my, your, his, her, its, our, and their. You use these when you want to show that something belongs to someone. For example, this is my book, or that's their house. Possessive pronouns help you avoid having to repeat the noun over and over.
Exactly. Pronouns might seem like small words, but they really make a difference in how natural and fluent your English sounds. And once you get comfortable using them, it'll feel like second nature to switch between he, she, they, and all the other pronouns. But Max, there's something else we haven't touched on yet that's really important for sentence structure tenses.
Yes, tenses are one of the most important parts of mastering English sentence structure. Tenses tell us when something happens, whether it's in the past, present, or future. Let's start with the present tense. Emma, can you give us a quick explanation?
Sure, the present tense is used to talk about things that are happening right now, or things that happen regularly. For example, I eat breakfast every morning, or she is studying English. In the present tense, we often use s or s endings for verbs when the subject is he, she, or it. For example, she runs, or it rains.
Exactly. The present tense is simple, but it's really useful for talking about everyday actions. Then we have the past tense, which is used to talk about things that already happened. For example, I ate breakfast this morning, or she studied English yesterday. In the past tense, we often add to regular verbs like walk becomes walked or play becomes played.
Yes, but remember, not all verbs are regular. We have irregular verbs which don't follow the usual head pattern. For example, go becomes went in the past tense and buy becomes bought. Irregular verbs can be tricky, but with practice, you'll start to memorize them.
Right. And then there's the future tense, which is used to talk about things that haven't happened yet but will happen. For example, I will eat breakfast tomorrow, or she will study English next week. The key word here is will. You just add will before the verb, and you've got a future tense sentence.
That's right. So, just to recap, present tense for now, past tense for what already happened, and future tense for what will happen. Once you get comfortable with these 3 basic tenses, you'll be able to talk about all sorts of situations in English. But Max, there's one more important topic we should touch on: passive and active voice.
Yes, the difference between active and passive voice is really important when you want to take your sentence structure to the next level. In an active sentence, the subject does the action. For example, the cat chased the mouse. Here, the subject, the cat, is doing the action of chasing. But in a passive sentence, the focus is on the action or the object, not the subject. So, you could say, the mouse was chased by the cat. The mouse becomes the focus of the sentence.
Exactly. Passive voice can be useful when you want to emphasize the action rather than who's doing it. For example, in news reports or formal writing, you might hear sentences like, the project was completed on time. It doesn't matter who did the project. The focus is on the fact that it was finished. But in everyday conversation, we usually use the active voice because it's more direct and clear.
Yes, and one thing to remember is that passive voice is formed using a form of the verb to be plus the past participle of the main verb. For example, is eaten, was built, or will be finished. It's good to be aware of passive voice, but for most conversations, the active voice will make your sentences sound stronger and clearer.
That's a great tip, Max. Another thing that helps with making your sentences clearer and more fluent is learning how to use relative clauses. Relative clauses help give extra information about the subject or object without starting a new sentence. We use words like who, that, or which to introduce these clauses. For example, the book that I read was interesting. The phrase that I read is a relative clause. It tells us more about the book.
Right. Relative clauses are a great way to combine sentences and add detail. Instead of saying, I read a book, the book was interesting, you can just say, the book that I read was interesting. It's shorter, more efficient, and keeps the information connected.
Exactly. And you can use relative clauses with people too. For example, the teacher who helped me is very kind. The relative clause who helped me gives us more information about the teacher. It's a simple trick, but it can make your sentences sound more advanced.
That's right, and using relative clauses is one of the easiest ways to make your sentences longer without making them confusing. Now, Emma, before we wrap up, there's something else that really helps learners practice and feedback.
Oh yes, definitely. You can learn all the grammar rules and sentence structures in the world, but the key to mastering English sentence structure is practice. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, that's how you learn. Try writing sentences every day, speak with others in English, or even practice in front of a mirror. The more you use what you've learned, the more natural it will feel.
Exactly, and when you practice, it's important to get feedback. If you have a teacher, a friend, or a language partner, ask them to check your sentences and give you tips. It's a great way to learn what you're doing well and what you can improve.
That's right, Max. And remember, learning a language is a journey. It takes time, and every step forward is progress. So don't get discouraged if it feels difficult at times. Keep practicing, and soon enough, you'll see big improvements in how you form sentences.
Absolutely, you've already made a great start by focusing on sentence structure, and that's a huge part of becoming fluent in English. Just keep at it, and don't forget to have fun with it.
Yes, learning should be fun. Before we go, we want to remind you to subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and share this podcast with your friends and family who are also learning English. The more you share, the more people can join in on the journey.
That's right, and thank you all for listening. Keep practicing, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone.